So, that worked. Here is the video. I've shrunk it down in the weird belief that I might save some hard disk space just replicating video in video. But it worked. I still suspect that using doubles instead of floats might make it a little smoother, and there are lots of things I'd like to do and try out with the rendering. But for the time being, this did render. Here it is, playing through its 40 seconds, looped 3 times. It's quite nice. It's not out of the ordinary. But what on earth? But sorry, I'm distracted by the fact this little asterisk has appeared next to our render, and that means I made some change to it, but probably I just deleted a remark or something. Anyway, for the time being, I need to get through this long list of things. Well, it's not that long. I've thought about the order of events here. Testing all the draw modes in the renderer is super important, along with exploring rendering options. That is using data buffers, clipping logic order. I am interested in what is the fastest, which are the fastest lines to eliminate. I'll make which are fastest lines to eliminate. Those things would be interesting once the render log requires render logs plus options in GUI to select render program. Maybe I can now just compile multiple versions of the rendering code and test out in detail which things like this, how they affect the speed. Also things like the number of lines off screen, on and partially, the total line length. That might be appropriate to all types of render. Total pixels drawn. I'll just say points drawn. That'll do. So that's that's kind of saying not only how long was the line altogether, but how much of it did actually need. Yeah, how many actual pixels were drawn of that length. Most of it was off screen, most of it was on screen, or what. Also, if the entire pattern is on screen, what's the difference between the length and the points drawn? This will be something to see. Yeah, exploring the rendering options requires the render logs. This is kind of the most important stuff, but it's not what I'm going to start with, because to implement some of these things, like whether or not the log is created, what type of the division occurs in the data entry. There's something else. This is done, so I will conflate those things. There was something else, and I probably put it in the wrong place. Yeah. This belongs in both places. But here, clean up after, clean up images after render if selected. That's a stupid way of putting it, but I'll know what I mean, because it basically is this. Do I want to keep the off? Yeah, okay, quality. All these things. That only applies to video. All these things, important for the renderer, but many require, and for the time being it's sort of easier. This is something that'll have to happen anyway, so I'm going to start with it, sort of similar to how I did with the gradient set. I'm going to do the GUI options for selecting, for the GUI gadgets for setting video options. It will be a slight rearrange. Let me see how quick and easy it is to run. Pretty quick. Some of these options refer to all outputs, static or animation. This I'm going to change to image and video. Some refer only to video, and this number of options it's starting to become too many options. It's very easy to shrink this down to a point where half of them, or a number of them, are invisible. Other things are, and the line width doesn't apply to the gradient draw mode, it's not relevant. I'm going to some lengths to alter the content of these options based on the options, like going between gradient and one of the ordinary color draw modes changes this option. So I can go further and say, if you are in draw mode gradient, line width is not displayed, only the gradient button option is. And also, if you're in one of these draw modes, the line width is not only displayed, but some other things will be displayed, because another draw mode that I would like to implement is to determine how each segment is drawn. At the moment they're lines, but I'm pretty sure replacing the line with an image might create other interesting and faster rendering effects. And I'm just going to give it a go and play around with it and see. But that means further options available when you're in draw, solid or alpha mode, which won't be available in gradient. I'm not going to write a thing that draws images to that array, rotated, scaled and clipped. I mean, I'm not sure I see the benefit of doing that, really. Maybe it'll come to it, but for the time being, gradient, the only real option associated with the gradient rendering is this, although that brings up other sort of issues. Oh, look at that, I managed to make this too short. Oh, this is a bit of a problem. It's just as well I can grab it by that, because that, yeah, this can be made too large for the window. Okay, anyway, forgetting that. Just thinking through these slight details of the GUI, which do need to change. One thing that needs to change is I need to take this down to 4 recursions so that I'm getting 60, because I'm a picky person. I have to save the position of this window as well, I gotta remember that. Thinking about the setup of this GUI and how it does relate to how I'm going to change it just now. These values don't actually relate to the gradient set. I was thinking, sort of thinking even as I was developing this, that the gradient set editor is a tool in itself for a very simple purpose to, edit these color gradients. And two-dimensional ones at that. It could use some improvements, but it does basically do what it needs to. These are not really related to two-dimensional or one-dimensional gradients. They're related to how this editor interprets the gradients. They're in here because they are only related to gradient drawing. But if I take it as read that different forms of draw mode are going to display a different set of options here anyway, which is to say, not only will paper and ink be associated with addition draw, so will line width, and so will segment style, that I think that switching to gradient, I can take these options out of here, because there will be some others associated with gradient drawing, and plop them out here, so that in here you only edit the gradient. The other things that will be outside, or if I didn't do that, would be end up in this box, are to do with the type of scaling you might want to apply to the output of the draw gradient curve. You might want to apply scaling to the array before you use it as the source of colors from the gradient. I'm not certain about that. It's a thing I have in my mind. I think if there's a lot more detail in the gradient than there can be in a lot more detail in the array, so to speak, than there can be between the bottom and top of the gradient, I am wondering if it makes sense to divide the array. Certainly, two ways you might do that is a linear division, where you just divide each value in the array by a number, by 2 maybe, and you scale the low and high, well, the high at any rate, scale the low as well, but mainly at 0, appropriately as well. And I'm just trying to think, I haven't really thought through the consequences of it, but it's whether or not it will bring slightly distant colours slightly closer together. Anyway, I'm going on about it because it's another of these options which I want to play with. Another is a non-linear scale, so that the larger the value, the more you scale down. I'm not sure how that would work in my mind. It's just I know that the topography, whatever you describe, the landscape of these shapes frequently has a lot of very high points, which can make most of the image quite dark if you're selecting from your gradient. If I'm selecting from my gradient in a linear way. But the upshot of this is this output thing has the things which are common to images and animations under all circumstances. It has, which are the width, the height, and the recursions. And it has the things that are relevant when you're drawing gradient mode, which is the gradient, and will be the low, the high, and the scaling. And it has the things that are relevant when you're in addition mode, which are the paper, ink, line width, and basically will be line style, which will include a line width when you're drawing lines. And the things that are associated with the video, which are the video loops, frames, and will also be quality, log options, and clean up images afterwards options. And possibly, in the future, render program options for testing different types of render logic. I think I've spoken through now for 15 minutes the things that I have to do and the order I'm going to do them in. So, the very first thing is I'm going to draw a quick picture. If this pen is behaving today, I'm going to draw a picture of what why on earth would I want that? I'm going to draw a picture of what I want this to look at like. I have no idea what I'm on. I'm going to call it 15. No, I won't. I'll call it A. Really doesn't matter. A picture of more or less what I want. I want it to look nothing like that, basically. Nor that. And I've drawn it all squint, don't matter. And I've drawn it pretty stupid as well. Why? It's so crazy that. As if select or delete. There must be an easier way to clear. Man, that's real bad. Forget this. I'm wasting so much time. I know why I'm doing this as well. What actually needs to be in display? Need width and height. What was the other thing that is common? Recursions. And that can have a big button because it needs the word recursions on it. Then there is the draw style. So this is like output. And there is draw. Draw options. And the top option is, well, I'm going to write gradient here, but actually that's the draw mode selector. And in this space what I'm going to draw is the gradient options. But the draw mode, the other options will be different. One is the gradient button. One will be the low and one will be the high threshold. And one will be the scale style. These will be headings, which I'm going to change the style of. I am going to reskin the GUI. And then video. Video, but then the thing is, it's just video options. The image options, effectively there are no image options. Really, are there? I suppose some things about, yeah, no, that's to do with the gradient. No, I don't think there are image options that are separate to output, width, height, recursions, and the draw options, whether it's gradient or addition. The other draw modes, in my mind, all for the time being, given the draw modes that there are, if it was addition, I'd want to see paper ink, I'd want to see line style or segment style, and then below that there would be further options, because the segment style would have written within it, that would be a button you would click and be offered a selection of segment styles, which effectively would offer, in this case I'm saying a line, beautifully, and in which case what you will be offered is a line thickness, or a thickness option. If the segment style was image, then you'd be offered, I think, a button which basically is saying what's the file name of the image, and then some other sort of button. You would still be offered paper and ink. That is associated with the draw modes of addition, alpha, solid. But with image you wouldn't be offered the thickness, you'd be offered some other control which probably would have to open a box, which would allow you to determine how the image was orientated relative to the beginning and end of the segment. How that would be displayed in here, I don't know. It might just be a button with the word image setup or something on it. I might make a little visual display which shows a beginning and end and an image orientated between them. I might. It's not really necessary. What would be necessary is to open a proper window when you click that button, which has got the display of the beginning and end of a this is an annoying thing to have to write, but a zoomable, scrollable display just like the worktop, with the beginning and end of the line just drawn, locked on it, and a movable rectangle, at least a rectangle, maybe movable corners of a quad, but at least a rectangle that you can scale, rotate and translate relative to these 2 points, and that would be used to generate the final image. Honestly, line and image are the only 2 styles of segment I can think of just now, because image obviously offers loads of other options. I don't know, I'm not exactly sure how the image rendering will work or look, but it's just a thing I'd like to try, just similar to the gradient division. I'm not exactly certain, but the first thing is to restructure this whole output options bit. Firstly, draw options will have a variable size. In some cases, there'll be gradient with a gradient button, low and high, and scale buttons. That's, that makes the whole of draw options, including the heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units high. Here it's also actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units high, is it? Yeah, for the line, when the draw option is line. And here it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 something at least 6, maybe more units high, depending on what type of display this is. But it's not predictable. And also, it has to remain unpredictable because I still don't know what draw options I may dream up, if any others. Also, video, I've got it as a heading here with a single button. What other buttons are there? There are only the video options. I don't think a heading with a single button, video options, is totally sensible. But I don't like the idea of buttons without headings. I don't much like, my headings look kind of cheesy. I sort of like them, but they're not exactly great. Having the things confined to, well, confining them to panels of their own is something sort of sensible. When I change the skin of the GUI, I'm probably going to have to, well, just have to think about how I do the headings. Confining these things to panels of their own makes some sense because I can hide and display entire panels worth of gadgets quickly when you do things like change the draw mode. I'm already doing that for these buttons. But maybe actually just having video options here just above render. And also I'm going to change the way the rendering works slightly in that you don't, when a render is in progress, both of these buttons are replaced by a single cancel render button, and that you don't get the option of starting a new render while one is in progress, but you do get the option of just stopping the current one. You should have the option of stopping the current render if you want to, and I'd better do it because I haven't really, I've played with interrupting a render by starting a new one, and it's always seemed okay, but I do want to just, do it a lot in a way, spring it on it. Make sure that the whole program doesn't just go down if I suddenly go stop that. Anyway. But maybe a single video options button here, without a heading. Because it'll just be there. This'll be, will it be more compact? This and this will be hidden. This, and this. This, and recursions will be up here. I'm going to put my pen away, I don't need it now. And, okay, so what will it be? 1, 2, and recursions, so 2 units high for the output. But then there'll be another thing for draw style. Then there'll be this. Then there'll be whatever else comes with the draw style. That will include line width in the case of addition, and gradient will include some other things. It's getting a bit crowded, and it's not going to make it a lot less crowded what I'm planning to do here. In some ways, more options are being added without making it less crowded, but more options are being added without making it more crowded. You could say, a net effect of less crowding. Is that right? Or whatever. Proportionally less crowding, but still crowded. And when I look at this, I think about the ways I could compress it. It's about making it less wordy. And I can see why people use icons. Of course I can display icons, but on the other hand, I don't like icons. I like being able to just see a word when it's possible, when it's convenient. Loads of times icons are fine, like here, sort of. They're fine, it makes sense. And I could probably replace a lot of this with a single row of icons. In fact, maybe I should consider that. Maybe I really should, because that's... suppose you could argue, I could argue that this is just kind of laziness. And it is in a way. It makes it easy to make obvious buttons. But the downside as well is also obvious, which is that the actual GUI is bulky. When I consider what would go inside an options button. Another way to make this less crowded is to stick the segment options inside an options button as well. Have it open a window just like clicking gradient does, which brings everything else to a halt, but that's kind of okay. Doesn't really matter as long as you do your work on this and then apply or cancel. Well, I think that for the time being I'm not going to go for anything more extreme than doing this reorganizing that I've pretty much described and making a video options window. I've done a lot of talking about this, in fact more than half an hour, without really doing any coding. So for the purposes of amending that, I'll do the stupidest and simplest piece of coding, which is I'll fix the render anim inside recursor, inside update anim. I guess that my wrap is inclusive, and I don't want to go and change that. G int wrap. Yeah, if number is greater than or equal to high. Okie doke. Well, in that case, I guess it's timer anim length. And the timer animation, where on earth do I bloody... Is that a good animation? I don't like the fact that the pipe is closer to the right than to the left. It is in this font, and it is, you know, it's like I did imagine what would be more fun. I think I'll do that. And I will, well, I'll give this thing a render. This, just because it'll be, well, let's just have a little look. Been considering more, you know, the troubles that I had making the process work. I'm delighted with the fact it seems to work, but I don't feel confident at all in the way I made it work. This is what happened for this not to remember my number of recursions. I am running with a debugger off, right? Yes. Right. 11 recursions is a good long render. Let's just see. I have a feeling this produces a completely saturated image, but where are we? Associated recursive things. This is a render I did of that. Pretty hideous, totally saturated. Took about, I don't know, I haven't got render logs to refer back to, but, you know, 20 minutes or something. 2.2 billion lines, just completely saturated because I wasn't paying attention. That was 12 recursions for that 2 point. So I'll just do a static render of this. And you can overwrite that. That is not better, I don't think. They appear to overlap because they are so much wider than the points. I am going to go back to pipes, for now anyway. I suppose I could have pipes with a minus instead of minuses with a pipe. What I was thinking is, if I'll see how this turns out. I think this is going to be completely saturated as well. In fact, I'm certain it will be. I can tell nicely now. High of 1,000, totally saturated. And taking a while, you know, 11 recursions of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 segments. I think I figured this out just the other day. Yeah, there. 1/3 of a billion lines. And I will go back to pipes. Or what'll I do? What's a nicer kind of... I could try out a couple. I'll do another render with a fewer number of recursions. I don't need to wait this long. And try out a different animation. Little things to note about the way this works. First off, that this can be brought back to Task Manager if it pops out by restarting Task Manager, which is nice to know. Secondly, I get more of the CPU because it's a separate process. Because my programs are simple, they're all just... the individual programs aren't multi-threading, so I get as much of the CPU as this code will spare for the rendering. Although that is most of it, to be fair. I guess when I'm doing the rendering with this program comes to a complete halt, so... Also, I don't think minimizing this... well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it got a little bit more. Doesn't... yeah. I guess maybe it is worth minimizing it. Nah, makes very little difference. Just little things to consider. Minimizing this makes a big difference to FFmpeg. FFmpeg's obviously clever, more cleverly coded than mine, and it'll take as much CPU as it can. Lots of threads or something, I guess. So when this is visible, it's taking time because it's updating as often as it can, 60 times a second in this case, and drawing a lot. So it's eating into some of what FFmpeg would use. But like that, it drops to near nothing. But because my renderer will only do one thing at a time, basically. I have thought about that. I've wondered if there's ways to divvy up the renderer. Probably are. Even if it was just a case of starting new processes. That might be an interesting thing to do. Could probably double the speed of the render, I guess. Or near. I'd have to think about how I did it. I suppose I could start the two... I could start the line at both ends. Or start halfway through the line, I guess. And then create two banks and just add the two banks together. And then, so it wouldn't really be doubling the speed, because adding the banks and producing the pix map at the end is pretty much producing the pix maps a set speed, and maybe it could maybe be divided up as well. Yeah, I mean it could be. There's actually no reason it couldn't be for the bulk of the work, and then at the very end, render complete. I think that I will try and take away that when render complete is said. But let's have a look. Still real saturated, but actually not nearly so bad. I'm going to take it down to 10. I'm going to hope this remembers how I set it up. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to think about... I'll just reverse this to be minus pipe, pipe, pipe. Pipe minus pipe, pipe. Pipe, pipe minus pipe. Oh no. Pipe, pipe minus pipe. And pipe, pipe, pipe minus. And I'll just see how it looks. I'm playing here because I'm avoiding the next big bit, which is making, like the next immediate bit is making the video options box so that I can start moving things out of. Well, it didn't remember my scale. It never does, which is an annoying thing, and I don't know why. Just something stupid I'm missing. Okay, 10 recursions. It remembered everything else. I guess I could just go for it. Yes, I do. It wasn't that great. And looking at that animation now, Uh, no, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like the way everything shifts to move the spot as it is, back to the start. This has been quite, it hasn't been a waste of time video, but I've hardly been productive. I think I'm going to have to take it down to 9 recursions. This is too long to wait. I could well, it's still too long to wait. I didn't need it demonstrated for that long. It's starting to look a lot nicer, but I will take it down to 9. Okay, and I will quit it again, and I guess I'll just go back to pipe minus. Is there something that's better balanced? It's hard to tell, obviously, with the different fonts. And also, do I need the square brackets even? Because the square brackets are constant, should I just make them, they're not part of the animation, so to speak? Yeah, I'm going to take them out. I can put them into the bit that actually constructs the message, and I'm going to go to the bit that constructs the message now because I want to slightly change it. Where are we? New message is this. First off, it's actually, for the time being, this, because I will keep the square brackets for now. But also, when it's render finish, okay, okay, well, okay, this is annoying, but I want to change the logic here a little bit. Okay, yes, you're quite right. I suppose I could just instantly say new message, like the simple thing to do is just say new message again, but this time just with a line. So under any circumstances, it'll have the animation. When it's complete, it won't. And under normal circumstances. Actually, under any, it'll get it for a moment. But then if it's finished, it'll be snatched away. Toying with the tiny animation, that's the kind of coding I like. Everything appears to work, and I'm just tweaking a little gadget. Well, don't know. Yeah, render complete. That's better. It's better not to have the non-animating. The thing that usually would animate suddenly stop animating does seem counterintuitive. And it looks quite nice. Now these high spots are beginning to make sense. I feel actually now at 9 recursions that's a fine amount of time to look at an animation. And also I could bring this down a bit. There are problems with this little bit of GUI. These requesters don't recognize the enter button on the keypad, and I go straight for the keypad to enter a number, so that needs to be fixed. They do recognize return. This needs to recognize return. I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to look at the little animation one more time, and I maybe will change it one more time. I really don't like the way that sometimes the resize doesn't quite get it right. That was much easier for it that time. Why was it so much easier? feel like I could still get away with getting a little more yellow in it. 600. Definitely need to go return it. Well, the thing about that animation, I quite like it, but it's a bit weird. I quite like the way this looks as well now. So I think I'll have one little more go. And what's a different option? I think maybe just going back to the pipe. It's boring, but everything else is maybe just a bit too odd. Even as it is, it's not like flashy. All it's doing is showing that it still thinks the render process is running. It's a bit kind of... Because the render process, if the render process was to come to a halt, let me think about this for a second, just while I'm on the subject, because I did take this bit out. This was making it crash, calling end render. It wasn't making it crash, it was terminating the whole program. For some reason, the combination of render process exit code being 0 and then me cancelling the timer, terminating the process and making the process null. Maybe if I just make the process null and terminate and cancel and nullify the timer, it won't stop the entire recursor program, but for some reason this did. This is the only other... I'm going to have to think about that. I need a blue beam shooting up into the sky. It's just if the... I think that this is significant, but if the render process, if the renderer does exit for some reason, I do want to pick it up with that. At the moment, the only way I have of knowing is when the renderer tells me explicitly. And if the renderer just crashes, it's not going to tell me explicitly. So this is all a little bit janky, basically. I don't want this though. I want, I think, just the pipe. There's nothing else. Like that is just a little symmetrical thing, and everything else is too recognisably something. The O is fairly recognisable. Unless there's just something else I could think of. I suppose there's always the dynamic I could have this auto-generate. And also would it look better without the square brackets? I could put pipes in instead of square brackets. I'll just do one more. Yeah, it's kind of out of line in my font. I think I will change the square brackets to pipes. And it's just the same as before, I'm not going to bother. That's not much use. And I won't change the square bracket. I mean, if I'm going to have the symbol be a pipe, I won't change the square brackets to pipes. And I don't want the symbol to be that because it's out of line. The O is in line with it, so we'll be out of line. I'm going to make it the O, and I'm going to make it pipes. This is a tiny little detail. It's just one of those things I get hung up on, and I will not make the next video all about me pondering things and making tiny changes to insignificant details. One more go, and then I'll leave it at that, and next time I'll make a new window, a new section of the recursor code. be fair though, I don't think the code's lovely now. There are things about it which are a niggle, like the fact that the work zone is a class inside recursor, but also the reference to it is a reference held inside GUI inside recursor. That's a weird thing. One more little look. Nah, I'm still, I'm not happy with it. I'm going to go back to the way it was after all that. The fact that the pipe is non-symmetrical is the problem here. And actually I think that O dash dash is better, because that non-symmetrical pipe becomes obvious. I think that the O is probably non-symmetrical relative to the square brackets as well. Taking away the dash would hopefully mitigate the non-symmetry of it. This is real hardcore pedantry. What I should do is, well, what I was going to say, what I should do is make the animation down here somewhere and make it a little swirly image. But actually, I don't know. This is the thing which is about informing you about the current render. I like that better. Yeah. Well, for now, that will do. Is there anything else I want to think about? I will do one last render. Oh, I forget the bit it was. Let me have a little shufty. Okay, I'll just go for the tiny little claw. And I'll bump it up to 11, which is going to take a little while. Yeah, and I'll leave this gradient where it is. The thing is, if it's going to take a while, this is a kind of problem. Without scaling options, I will leave it where it is. It's much more zoomed in, so the line is effectively much thinner. And there's no discernible, whenever that little animation moves, the program is opening a file, reading a line, and closing the file. And there's no discernible drop in frame rate. The FPS never changes once. I expect it's something, but it's not a noticeable. It's not a noticeable effect on the. This would be a situation where the log would be interesting, I suppose. What's the total length of the line considered, and how many pixels of that line are actually drawn? Many thousands, but many millions, I guess. Well, I have been putting it off, and this has been a video about putting it off and concentrating on small problems, but I'm pleased to have solved that small problem. I can still see the asymmetry. Like the O gets closer to the right hand bracket than the left. What a silly pedant. Don't think there's anything I can do about that. Not while I'm using this simple little system. But yeah, so next time making the window and getting on to the next changes as well, because testing out the other parts of the renderer, once these options are there, easy to access, will be good. And once I know it's fairly stable, changing the GUI, reskinning it, is not a massive job, particularly considering the sort of skin I'm going to make, which will be very simple, just plain boxes, I think. Perhaps this was too long either. Certainly gotten sick of my animation now. And I've bloody dragged this out, haven't I? Nearly an hour. Excuse me. Next time we'll be more productive with more changes to render complete. Quite lovely. I could have got away with dropping the top threshold a bit, but it's still fascinating in a way. It actually does remind me of one more thing I'll just mention before I stop, which is another form of path. This does need to change slightly. It could be compressed a bit, but also this needs to become, away from point, it needs to be selection. So that part of the reorganizing of the recursor code is to rename these things. These things are called corners, and I feel okay with that. These things are called verts, and that's ridiculous. A corner just has multiple controls. This is really a control point of a path, as is this really, and collectively they form a corner. Where was that going? Bad names for things. Anyway, the main thing is, this is what is selected, and therefore what is going to be acted on by this. But now this is what's selected, even though this is also selected. This is the thing that will be acted on by this. But when I select that, I don't want this selected anymore. I want this to change to have this selected, because I want to be able to adding control points to the display, so that part of the animation is where the display is, where its corners are, how far zoomed in it is. So that part of an animation might be having the display zoom and rotate into a particular part of it, then zoom and rotate back out, or just zoom and rotate to a particular part of it. Which isn't that hard to do. It just does mean more control over the display, which means changing this, but that's pretty facile. More controls on screen and stuff, so I'll probably try and improve the guide appearance before I change the display management. That is the end of my chatter. Nice. And I will make a video options window next time.